Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and I have a question for you. Are you aware that you are a salesperson and that we are always evaluating things as purchasers? So, no matter what type of job that you have, you really must be aware of the process that we go through as we make buying decisions. And if you're in the sales industry, do you know what you don't know? And so, getting the right information really means knowing who has that information and who has the ability to make decisions. Let's face it, every organization really relies on external vendors and other companies to help provide them resources, even if it's toilet paper or copy paper, to help make sure that their daily operations are going well. Not even the car manufacturers make all the parts that go inside of their car, and so there are really specifications that need to be met in order to make the products and services that organizations use and people purchase. So being aware on how people make those decisions is absolutely important. I want to go over a few terms today related to buying decisions, and whether or not you see yourself as a salesperson or you're putting yourself in the position of having a better quality life, you really need to be aware of certain terms and how things really work in the real world in order for you to make the best decisions possible. We need to be aware of that companies are purchasing products from other companies, and sometimes things look like a better deal than they actually are. Just because you have a box that is the same size, that has the same amount of packages in it, maybe the pieces inside those packages are not the same. So that's just one thing that we need to be aware of as consumers. And whether or not we're buying for a company or we're buying for ourselves or our families, we need to really be able to take a look at small things like piece count. A lot of companies distinguish their products by being better quality, and sometimes just because something costs a little bit more, being aware of how long that product will actually last, or how much utility you get out of that product, paying a little bit more may actually be the better deal. And very often we look at things from a short-term perspective. We think we're saving money, but ultimately if we had just paid a little bit more, we probably could have gotten better quality, whatever it is, out of that. I personally like buying, for instance, organic vegetables. What we know about organic vegetables versus non-organic vegetables, especially genetically modified fruits and vegetables, is that there is more nutrients. So if I have a banana, for instance, that's grown organically without pesticides, not only am I not putting poison into my body, which is often an outcome when you're spraying fruits and vegetables with poisons in order to keep vegetables off of it, but I'm also getting more natural nutrients from the fruits and vegetables that I buy, because they're grown the way that they're naturally supposed to be grown, as opposed to grown quickly to get better results. So I think if you look at the literature related to organic versus non-organic, you'll actually see that there's more nutrients in non-organic fruits and vegetables, and you're not lowering your immune system and introducing toxins into your body that possibly could be causing cancer. And the difference between an organic banana versus a non-organic banana may be 10 or 20 cents per pound. And if you think about a bunch of bananas which may weigh about a pound, you're probably saving 20 cents. And isn't your health actually worth it? So just a small example. I like to use the example of perhaps pepperoni. A pizza company goes and buys a pepperoni pizza, or buys pepperoni for their pizzas, and they're looking at cases of of pepperoni from one manufacturer, and they see that they get 5 packages of pepperoni, but inside those slices of pepperoni there's only 100 slices of pepperoni in one bag. But the competitor, who has a price that's just a little bit more than that, may have 120 slices. So ultimately that case may actually yield more pizzas and actually save the company more money in the longer run. There's lots of different examples about that. Looking at machinery like photocopiers. You buy a photocopier for your company, and it only can produce so many prints before it has to be refurbished. And so would paying for the more expensive one, which may cost you ultimately $100 more or whatever it is, I'm making up a number, ultimately in paying that much more, would it actually last a little bit longer, and would you get better quality prints so that your customers actually see you as a better quality organization? So there's a lot of different things to consider. As resellers of products like photocopy paper, you have to consider profit margin and turnover very often too. Profit margin is really, how much money you actually make on each sale, and that really matters. And ultimately you have to look at things from a small perspective and a long perspective, and you also need to consider something called turnover. How quickly will that product sell? If I buy 100 units of this, will that sale, will that really justify the means? When I was in the grocery industry, we had to justify, shelf space, and sometimes you could have a product that's really got excellent profit margin, but because it sat on the shelf so much longer, you probably ultimately would have been making more money by having a cheaper product with a little less profit margin in it too. So just a few considerations for you to think about. Government agencies are an interesting institution. They probably are the largest single entity that purchases products and goods and services. And in order to do business with government agencies, you got to get special certifications and approvals and processes. And it's that way with a lot of different types of organizations, that if you work for them, you've got approved vendors, and you can get on that approved vendor list, but you've got to be able to jump through their hoops. So you as a business owner really must be aware of the fact that you may have a great product or service, but you may be able to increase your revenues if you are able to really identify who your end users are and figure out what it would take for you to be able to accomplish your goal of increasing your sales and generating more customers. Ideally, of course, you want to keep your customer completely satisfied, because that means they probably won't be looking for alternatives. But if you have a customer that's completely satisfied and another salesperson from another organization comes back and says that they might be able to get them a better deal, you must be able to consider, how can you keep that client, or what kind of added value can you give to that client before you lose that client. And so kind of a simple customer, but you never own, or concept, but you never own a customer. You earn their business, and you must do the maintenance with that customer to maintain that relationship and make sure they always see the added value. And when someone else comes along and with a product that may be cheaper than that product, you also need to maybe help remind your customer of the added value that they have there, whether it be for price or for quality or for image. And so there's a lot of different ways to help people remember the added value, but that is your job as a sales. The same thing goes within the workplace. We are all our own brand managers, as you may have heard me say in other videos. That means you are in charge of helping people really understand your added value that you bring to their life. I like to use the term linchpin. Be that linchpin, and a linchpin is something that if it was removed from any piece of machinery, that machinery would not work. And you can be that person if you recognize your own value and your own strengths. So we do these things all the time, and I'm not talking about bragging about yourself, but really doing efforts that help make you invaluable to your organization. You're doing things so superbly well that if people ever thought about losing you, they would probably really get stressed out. And so they want to treat you very, very well because you've earned it. So always be going above and beyond. People who are getting promoted in the workplace are probably not the people that are just getting by and doing what they're told. They're probably going above and beyond. And that's how you become the linchpin. You know, you make it your point to make sure that you're always adding value in every situation. Really be aware of how people make decision processes, you know, and essentially there are 8 steps. You know, 1, people recognize that there's a need. 2, the definition of a product or type is needed. So now that you know you need something, you got to figure out what that product really looks like, and then you've got to really be aware of the detailed specifications, because this is when we as decision makers really have to figure out what our choices are, and be very, very clear on what we need and what we don't need. We don't want to buy too much of something, or something that does things that we don't know. I think about buying or talking with a salesperson and not realizing that I needed that product until I realized that the product could make me, you know, taller, sexier, better looking, smarter, you know, whatever it is. So sometimes we don't always know what we don't know, and so we need to be open to really listening to effective salespeople. And I get there are evil salespeople out there who try to sell you something that you don't need, or don't listen to the fact that you really can't afford it. But sometimes when we think we can't afford something, maybe we can't afford not to have it, you know, like a textbook. I see students all the time who think they can get through a course without buying a textbook, or they try to buy a cheaper version of a textbook, maybe an outdated textbook, but it doesn't have, they're not following along as well, and so you make one bad decision over another bad decision, and before you know it, because you didn't buy the thing that was actually recommended for the purpose of helping making their life better, they've actually made their life a little bit worse. So I'm following that analogy, but you know, once you purchase the product, then you need to be able to evaluate it. Is it really meeting our needs? And then making sure that you're constantly getting what it is you need to replenish that. And so people are always evaluating products or service. So if you are a product or service provider, making sure that you are checking in with your customers, and if it's not meeting their satisfaction, try to make something meet their satisfaction, or help them find value in some particular way. So we just need to be aware of you know, how we do things. New task, you know, buying decisions is a term that we use in the sales industry, and that's purchasing a product or service for the very first time, or straight buys. You know, you're buying the same product from a source that it was previously bought in, or a modified rebuy. You know, you're really looking for new information and or looking at your alternatives, and so you may change the way that you buy things. But ultimately, we really need to be aware of our own buying habits and our own needs, and it doesn't make sense to buy more product or service than you possibly need. But you do really need to be aware of the fact that you need to get what you need to get. There will always be people who influence other people in the buying decision process. I'm a firm believer of, just because you may see somebody with the title of administrative assistant, if you don't believe that person is a very important person in that organization, you should have a paradigm shift, because that person's boss is probably highly influenced by an administrative assistant. So they can be very important influencers to people who do have the abilities to make it. And then there are other people in the organization that have a lot of influence on other people. So if they're very well respected, and we all have our own circles where we all are opinion leaders, where people respect what we have to say, and we need to be aware of that. But if you could understand who those people are, and you have a product or service that you want to introduce to an organization, you might be able to use an influencer to actually connect with the person or people who actually make the decision. And we call those deciders. The people who ultimately approve a purchase in an organization are called deciders. And we also need to be aware of the fact that many times the people who make the decisions have gatekeepers there. There may be systems in that organization and specific people that are out there to kind of smell, salespeople who are kind of shifty and trying to sell product that the company doesn't need, or maybe they're there to control costs. So a lot of different considerations. We have to always be aware of not everything will last a long time, and we don't always need things that last a long time. Sometimes we just need things that does the job. You can buy laundry detergent, for instance, and they probably will all clean your clothes because they go through the wash cycle, but do your colors fade using one type of laundry detergent or another? And would it be better, if your appearance was really important, to have bright, clean clothes? Some laundry detergents don't work as effectively as another one, but you've saved a few bucks, but ultimately you're going to have to pay more for new clothes in the long run because your clothes wear out. So yeah, we're always making decisions, and we always need to be aware of the fact that nobody owns a customer. We always need to be adding value. We earn loyalty from our customers. We, as salespeople, we need to help people understand how to make decisions, and we do that by lowering risk. We help people clearly make their decisions by understanding what things are and what they're not, how long things are going to last, and what people typically say about things. So yeah, lots of decisions, and some organizations don't have only certain budgets that they can spend on things, just like us as individuals. So we always have to know what we don't know. Even if you are not in the sales profession, you have to consider yourself a salesperson. You probably will have job interviews, and being aware of what organizations are looking for and not looking for. But if you know your true value, you're able to articulate it in a job interview, for instance. And if you know your true value, you won't settle for less. You don't want to sell yourself into an organization that is not clearly in alignment with your own personal values, or you'll probably be miserable. And I know that many subconsciously, they just need a job, and so they'll work really hard to get that job. But when they work for the organization, and the organization is doing things that's not in alignment with an individual's values, or they don't like the quality of supervision or whatever it is, they tend to sabotage their own jobs because they don't want to quit a job they're miserable in. And too often that could have been avoided if people did a better job of selling their own value on a regular basis without being braggadocious, but also really bringing added value to whatever team that they're working on too. You want to be the linchpin. You want to always provide value, and you want to make sure that as a brand manager, that when you find out someone's not happy with what it is that you're doing, and you address that problem in a mature, respectful way that helps create win-win solutions. All right, I know I've talked for a long time, and I really appreciate your time. I hope you've taken something of value out of this presentation. Remember, you're the only one who gets to create your own successes and failures, and it's about your choices. And speaking of choices, I hope that you have a great day, because only you get to choose how you feel about it. I'm Dr.